So, in the midst of our study, which is still amazing imputation, subtitle definitely I should be amazed. We're still ramping up to help us to really comprehend what amazing should look like. And so, having said that, the question that I pose to you right now that begs your response is, what's the difference in common grace versus amazing grace? In fact, what do you think the definition of common grace might be versus amazing grace? Or is there such a thing at all? Oh, that's a question for you.
I think when we talk about common grace, you're referring to, for example, the rain falls on the righteous and unrighteous.
Yeah.
That's sort of a common grace where everyone gets to enjoy that. Amazing grace is what Jesus did for us. That's amazing grace.
Yeah. I would even go so far to build on what Steve said as, if you're in America, right, there's a kind of providence that said that you're going to be born here in the greatest empire that's ever been. And I would suggest, almost in the teasing that Trent did earlier, you take for granted that you're an American. And there's a common grace about that, because it certainly may have been providential and fortuitous from the Lord's position, but it's not as special as the amazing grace. So you take for granted, as Americans, you should have certain rights, certain privileges, in addition to certain belongings, certain rights of ownership, certain freedoms. You take it for granted. Steve mentioned that the amazing grace is something different than that. You continue. Your thoughts about it. Okay, you know what? Maybe that's such a deep. Oh,
sorry. I'm trying to put the mute button on over here. I'll say, hopefully you can hear over her.
Yes.
You do have to be careful with the term common grace. The way we understand it is exactly what we already said, just the rain falls on the just and the unjust. We live in America, all that awesome stuff. There's the Arminian philosophy or the Pelagian philosophy that still has some currency in mainline Protestantism, especially.
Yeah.
Methodism is one of the biggest places for it.
Yeah.
Common grace is Jesus died on the cross, and therefore you now have the common grace that all of the obstacle is removed. All you have to do is just come to him of your own free will, and your free will participates with his work, and therefore you're saved. Which also has the implications of, as soon as your free will vanishes, your part of the deal is void. So that's a lot of the excuse for being able to lose your salvation comes from in the ideology.
Right. Yeah, but thank you for that, Trent.
Also, we're in more the Reformed tradition that says your free will is kind of just like your expression so that God can do all of the work for you. And common grace is not really in this arena at all. So I just wanted to throw out, be careful whom you use the term on, because they might completely misunderstand you and go off on some weird tangent that you weren't expecting.
Yeah, and I appreciate that from the doctrinal standpoint, because our common grace really is not the Arminian concept of common grace. And thank you for that. So that's exposing us to the fact that those folks that are hyper-Calvin, well, the folks that split Eastern and Western doctrinally have a different idea of what Jesus's sacrifice means as it permeates mankind and how we access it, and then what we get from it. We're talking about, kind of like what Trent said, is we're almost talking about a sense of mundane grace or trivial grace versus amazing grace. So if we're building a bit on Trent's helping to diversify that, how do you feel about the two? And are they the same for you? And if not, what?
I mean, go ahead.
You got the floor, Trent.
Okay. It sounds cheesy, but more and more each day, it all seems amazing to me. You know, and we talk about the amazing grace, like in the song that, you know, you wouldn't even be here without that. Like, we wouldn't even be having this discussion. You know, the amazing grace is what got you saved. Like, yeah, sure, but also all of it's amazing. You know, we talk about that, you know, the universe subsists because of Jesus Christ's activity, right? Yeah, all of this would just fly into a million little subatomic particles and have no, you know, comprehensible structure at all if God just kind of said, you know what, never mind. um, Consider the amazing grace that seems common, that the Holy Spirit's one of his ministries is as the restrainer of evil during this age, right? Part of
Yeah.
coming to earth, being sent as comforter, is also to be restrainer. And eschatology says he's going to be taken away for a time, and then you're going to see true evil. Like, that's how it culminates, is you're going to see evil someday. You think you have it bad now, just you wait. And I think that's amazing. But it's also common. It's something that we just all live with and live by means of all the time, and it has very little to nothing to do with any of our worth whatsoever, or any of our, you know, individual, you know, calling and mission. It's a general enablement.
So if we have access to something in many ways that is both mundane and amazing at the same time, how do we operate in a way that amazing stays on the amazing side and mundane stays on the mundane side? And is that confusing? So,
Before you go there, Preston,
sure.
in our cancel culture, in our accusation makes guilt society, do we really have outside of Christianity anything that really looks like grace?
Great question. So let's answer that, or let's address that maybe in two levels. When Brother Gina asked that question, what do you think that people who are not Jesus believers believe about what's amazing about the world in their life? And I'm going to make us a mindful of something in a second. And then my second question, and this is really the one that I'm focusing on, is how do people that profess, that are church members, do we find amazing? Okay. This is another week where, as I'm reading my news, I'm finding suicides from famous people and kids of famous people. And let me share something else with you. My wife brought this to my attention, and I wasn't thinking about it all for today, but when Trent talks about things the way that he does, sometimes it inspires maybe decent allusions to help you to see this. You guys are familiar with the actor Tom Hanks, correct? Now, for all intents and purposes, none of us know him, unless somebody that it's on the broadcast here, we don't know that you know him. But when we look from the outside in, it looks like he's a guy you'd like to get to know. It looks like he's a guy who's a relatively down-to-earth kind of movie star. It's like he's a guy who remembers his humble beginnings, and it also looks like he is one of the most profitable actors that exists right now. If he's in a movie, that's enough that movie is going to draw people. Well, if you were reading the pop culture news this week, his son, Chet Hanks, absolutely disparaged his father and his growing up. He didn't have a father figure. People were picking on him. People were bullying him. Not necessarily to his face, but behind his back. Yeah, he got to travel first class. He got to go to a lot of places, and he had a lot of things. But basically, his childhood was terrible. What do you think that individual finds amazing?
not much.
Probably not much. And I would suggest to you that Chet Hanks, in many ways, is a reflection of the world at large. With everything available, and even the amazing nature of what Jesus has done available, he finds life to be pretty much a drag. Now, he's not at the point right now where he's committing suicide, but if you take a look at this young man, he's got tons of body piercings and tattoos almost every place in his body and a shaved head. And in many ways, I'm not telling you that those behaviors in themselves are terrible, but what I'm saying is they don't seem to represent the ideals of the family that he belongs to. He's the Lone Ranger amongst the 5 of his parents and his 3 other brothers and sisters.
That's a lot of what the world tells us we should be. It's all about our outward appearances,
Yeah.
and how we look,
Yeah.
having the right clothes, the right hair. Look at the cosmetic surgery that goes on, but you change your body that was created, and it's not usually to the better. And I'll sometimes watch, I don't know what that one is, where they have the 2 people that, the 2 doctors that are the cosmetic surgeons, and they try to
Fix the body surgery.
people, yeah. And it's just very sad to see how some people are just never satisfied with what they have, and they want to be even more extreme, or they feel like they don't measure up. And it's like, you look at that emptiness, and I guess that's what common grace is.
Okay.
Because it's like God is our parent. He's created all of this beauty for us.
Yep.
And ourselves.
Yep.
We can't even see the treasure that's in each of
Yep.
ourselves. And he doesn't give us the smite. You think about I think about how far I was from him.
Yep.
And what he saved me from. That's when the amazing comes in. When you finally figure out what he saved you from. But up until then, it's kind of like common. It's common grace. You take for granted a lot of what he gives you, and he doesn't smite you when you deserve it.
Okay. And you get used to not being smited. And you keep having your hand up, if not even higher and higher, going, I know you took care of yesterday, but what about now? I know you took care of yesterday, but what about now?
You're searching for something.
Yes.
That in us to seek. So you're searching, and there's lots of things to find in this world that will never give you peace or any kind of purpose.
Okay. So how accessible is God's amazing grace? How accessible to mankind?
You got to actually take it.
Okay, how accessible? On a scale of 1 to 10, in terms of 10 being difficult, 1 being easy.
So I think when people who aren't Christians or new to the faith,
Yep.
whatever, they're more at the lower end of the spectrum because they think, especially if they're not in the faith, because they're like, well, I can't get that.
Okay.
You guys are much better than me.
Yep.
Right. And then it's when you get into that relationship with God, you realize that grace abounds, but you have to actually accept it.
Okay. So do you have to be a decathlete to get God's grace?
No,
How about a biathlete?
nope.
How about an Olympic level athlete?
There is nothing special that you need to be. You can just be yourself.
So then why don't we consider amazing in this regard?
Because we all think that we have to be something special in order to be able to get anything.
And if we're not?
And if we're not, then who cares about us?
So you're suggesting that in some regard that we downplay amazing because it's central to me.
Say that one more time.
You're saying in some ways that we downplay amazing because it's central to how I feel, maybe about me.
I think so, because people don't think that they're special. So why should it be amazing?
Okay.
Because there's nothing special about me other than the fact that God made me.
Okay.
That is the only thing that we need to realize that's special.
But we listen to
I
our
think there are a
Father
lot of people who
lies.
think they're special.
Good.
Correct. That's a lot of the narrative in this world. If you're not this, then oh man. If you're not transgender, then oh wow. If you're a regular heterosexual whatever,
Sister.
thank you.
I had to.
Yeah, nothing exciting going on, and it's like, wow, when bought in all this stuff. If you're not beautiful, if you don't have the latest this, or you're not traveling, I mean, even our Facebook, people get caught up in everything people are doing. They're thinking, I'm not going anywhere. I can't afford that.
Lifestyles and Ricky.
Yes.
Okay.
Everybody else is having fun.
But I also think that there's another issue too. I think that there are plenty of people who think they're extra special.
Okay.
And because they think they're extra special, they don't need, what do they need with the major churches? I don't need that for. I've got 1 million followers on my Instagram account.
Right. You know, some of the points that you guys are making is sometimes amazing is in the eye of the beholder. And if the beholder is me, I don't find that thing that supposedly happened historically 2,000 years ago all that amazing. Because if anybody can just get it, it may not be all that amazing. But I have 100,000 followers on TikTok. I have 100,000 subscribers on my YouTube chat page. It's pretty doggone amazing. So, you said something in a funny way, Sarah. You said, well, you know, God made me. That should be amazing, is it?
We take that for granted, but it should be amazing.
How should we take it for granted?
Because there are so many things that doctors can't even explain how things work. I'm just saying. But we take it for granted that we are going to wake up tomorrow, that we are going to make it home today, wherever we are. We take it all for granted. And a lot of it is because of our westernized civilization that we have stuff.
Yes.
We have all kinds of stuff. And people tend to equate how amazing they are with the stuff that they have, right?
Yep.
And if you don't have that, then who cares? But, you know, our view of amazing has changed.
How so?
Because, I mean, if you ask our parents, right?
Uh-huh.
They didn't have the stuff that's out there today, right?
Right.
But they were very well grounded. I don't know if that's the right way I want to say it, but well grounded in their faith, and they knew what they had was what they needed.
Wow.
And now a lot of times we like to keep up with the Joneses.
Okay.
And we're like, oh, what's the latest and greatest gadget? Do I need it? Well, no, but do I want it? That's going to make some, right? Just it's amazing. It's just changed. Unfortunately, changed for the worse.
Okay.
Yeah, but that Chet dude, you know, he grew up with so much privilege, and you know, here is this whole podcast or whatever saying how woe is me, which goes back to, you know, Diane said, you know, God made us in His image to seek Him, and so this dude that had all of this in front of him is not a happy person because he's in rebellion to the person that he should be seeking. But and I think that, you know, as much as on the outside surround yourself with, now he's going to have whatever fame on the YouTube right now or whatever, and have his following because he was a victim or that or, you know, whatever. But it still goes down to in his core, he's empty. You know, similar to, I had a conversation with a young person to say that, you know, Jesus loves you, He wants a relationship with me, and the answer I got back was, why would He want to do that? I'm just in a relationship. I think a lot of people feel that way.
I think Diane's very spot on when she says this truth that we don't really think a lot about because we're too civilized and too advanced. We've bought into a lot of what the father of lies suggests. And some of this was less pervasive in our parents' generation because TV and certainly the interweb did not exist during our parents' generation. So think about this, and I love that Diane went down this course. For the most part, you would have no use for commercials if people were satisfied, if not with themselves, but also considered amazing in the right place where it's supposed to be. Because basically all of our commercials tell you what? You need this. You need this because you're not complete. Well, step one, you need this because this will complete me. You complete me. And then step two is you deserve this. And that the funny thing of you deserve, that's not only on your commercials. If you watch certainly our HGTV shows, you will regularly, one of the mantras of the Property Brothers is Interlink. After they just spend your $100,000 renovating your kitchen, only. They tell you, you'll sit there, you make it, and they'll say, no, you deserve this. And so our culture is getting a warped sense of what they deserve and what they consider amazing versus the simplicity of being able to access the amazing that Jesus did for us. And there's not maybe a supporting cast of believers around some of these people to say, excuse me, Property Brothers, because I can't remember your names right now, so I'm going to call you Property Brothers, if not Property Brothers twins. You don't need to meet Jesus. And I can tell you how to meet him, but I need to maybe tell you who he is, because what you're calling amazing and deserved is not amazing and deserved. Now, it takes a whole lot of big boy pants to put yourself in a position to say that to somebody. And you probably all have friends, if they're not church friends only, that feel kind of the way that you heard Ellen say. I talked to this young person. They said, why would the creator of the universe want a relationship with me? And I would tell you, one of the early conversations we had about this is when we were talking about bondservants, was young people right now do not have a reason to live. They don't know why they're living. And when Trent, and when the video here is talking about these movements, because Trent talked about kind of how a mob mentality works. Young people want to be involved in something. Sometimes good or not. They want to be involved in something. And when the involvement in some ways doesn't take them to amazing, well, then they take their lives.
I mean, look at how many parents spend so much time on this, their tablets. I mean, you see it in restaurants. You'll see families sitting down with young kids, and the mother and the dad are on the phones, and the kids are just sitting there, sometimes on a tablet too.
Right.
So, I mean, we're taking out the one-on-one, the building of a relationship. I think that's why people feel so blessed.
Okay. And the internet is going to explain what amazing is better than talking to you. And what the internet shows that are amazing are followers. Amazon, anything from Amazon is amazing. Siri will tell me what's amazing. Google usually will tell me something better than you have anything to say once I hit it 3 seconds afterwards. Why should I listen to you and your sense of what amazing is?
This is part of why I brought up the whole embrace of the tragic thing earlier. You know, make the sugar taste sweeter, that we're not good at as church people.
Right. Right.
And you remember the title of the theme song to MASH? It's called
Suicide is painless. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's a very common idea right now. Why is that matter? Because there's pain. We don't tell people what to do with pain. We tell people, we'll pray for you, but we don't tell people what to do with it. And I think that's a big disservice. You know, the culture's obviously terrible at it because you deserve this and this is amazing and blah, 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 just like we said.
Right.
But I think that's the path in for us to be part of the rescue package, is to say, you know what, it does hurt.
Yep.
It is hard. We didn't promise you a bed of roses or a rose garden or, you know, all the whatever saying you want to use. But suicide isn't painless. Substance abuse isn't painless. Searching around for an identity and somebody that'll accept you isn't painless, because you'll be constantly searching. The pain won't go away. You'll make more pain for people around you. Here, I have an identity for you. I have a belonging for you.
Right.
I have a abiding for you that even with the pain gives you something better in the meantime, gives you something better in the future.
Yep.
And that's what our message is meant to be. Because we know it's hard. Say it's okay that it's hard, rather than saying We'll make it not hard.
I think you have just insulted a lot of our churches today, Trent, who refuse to want to say that to people because the feel-goody message is one that church participants today want to hear. I remember the lectures almost based on what you're talking about. We used to get those in church all the time when I was a young man. But remember, those churches also were populated by our parents' generation. And our parents' generation were used to what the travesty of war looks like, what sacrifice personally meant, what economic disparity and disaster felt like, what rationing was like. So they understood the days of having compared to the days of not having. And there was an appreciation throughout their lifetime as the greatest generation that spilled over kind of to our parents and a little bit that we got to experience. But the funny thing about what we took from that was, oh, well, then we're not going to make our lives for our kids, the lives for our kids be as tough as my parents were. And then we unceremoniously, or maybe ceremoniously, gave things to our kids and ourselves to say, we are beyond that. We will never experience famine or the lack of, or sacrificing for one another, even so much as sacrificing for the country, for the good of others. We're never going to experience that again. And so Christians don't spend a lot of time saying easy believism doesn't exist. Access to Jesus is simple, but please recognize that that doesn't mean, like Trent said, a bed of roses or rose garden. It's a free gift, but the life afterwards means that there's going to be heartache. You're not going to have, and there's certainly a lot of denominations that teach that you're also promised healing because of Jesus' stripes in Isaiah 53 on the cross. That with his stripes you are healed. So you have access not only to salvation and not being an enemy of Yahweh God, you also have access to healing. And so when Trent says that's the answer that person by person, church to congregants that should be suggested, not even suggested, that should be presented, we don't do it. We don't do it because we want converts who are kind of have rose-colored glasses on. And we don't do the thing that Steve regularly suggests, which is have them experience the faith that allows them to accept Jesus in his life and what it is that he did for us, and then tell them there's a whole lot of crap that's going to be on your doorstep now. There's a whole lot of hard living that you may experience. But the reason you're doing this is not for the now only. It's for the fact that when this only is over, there's something greater and bigger. And that is where you'll have a life that right now you can't even aspire to thinking. But folks, we struggle with the good stuff. The stuff that we value is good in this lifetime. The stuff that we value is amazing. And sometimes when we hold it side by side with this historical event, which in some ways for us it only is, we don't find it as amazing. Jesus' death and resurrection is not as amazing as an iPhone 13. It's not as amazing as the interweb. It's not as amazing as Jeff Bezos, let alone Elon Musk. Those dudes kick butt. That Jesus stuff sounds antiquated. And it happened a long time ago. And I had a profession of faith about 40 years ago, and that's great. And I've been a believer for about 50 years now, and it's all good. I hope somebody was offended by what I just said.
When Jeff Bezos blows himself up going into space and resurrects 3 days later, then I might agree with you.
So if you didn't hear Steve talked about being amazed at Jeff Bezos when he goes into space and then is blown up, and 3 days later, if he resurrects, that will be amazing.
I was going to say, we also can't forget that Jesus said, come follow me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And yeah, he was talking to Pharisees about all of the heavy things that they impose on people, but guess what? Even if we're not specifically talking about Phariseeism, We are talking about all of the heavy things that we impose on ourselves. That's exactly what we've been talking about this whole time. You know,
Correct.
there's one unpardonable sin, and this is one of the ministries that the Holy Spirit does, is convict or enlighten us that there's only one sin left that's unforgivable, and that's not believing in the Savior. All of the other sins are done. So if you are looking around, my life is so hard, why doesn't this work? All this stuff, guess what? It's because you're trying so hard. It's because you're still bound up in all of the sins that you still have to atone for, and you have to figure out, and you have to resolve and deal with, and somebody else is at fault for all this. No, it's all gone. That's what's good news about it.
Correct.
Good news is Jesus died for you. I'm like, well, okay, but what does it mean is all of that stuff really doesn't matter. All we have to do now is chip away at all the waste product, all of the casing material.
Wow.
Holding you down. It's heavy.
Wow.
It weighs a lot and it's restricting. Get rid of that, which you can't do yourself. Obviously, that's why we say follow him.
Yep.
Let the Holy Spirit work in you and through you, because that will remove all of that detritus. It will remove all of that calcification. It will remove all of that misdirected desire, so that you will see that the yoke is easy and the burden is light. That's the hope of it. So,
Trent, what I hear you saying is what is the amazing that I try to regularly conceive of on a daily basis. And it sounds like if you're doing that as well, if not even from an academic standpoint, from a practical standpoint, every day you're reminded of the amount of excrement you could be swimming in. And you recognize that what amazing does is you don't have to try to swim through it. You actually can walk through it. And the funny thing about it is the creator of the universe finds you in white and smelling like you've been Cloroxed.
I mean, I bring up the joke about the Pope asking Michelangelo, how did he make David? And Michelangelo says, well, I start with a block of marble and take away everything that isn't David. Well, guess what? He uses a hammer and a chisel for a lot of that job.
Right.
Good illustration. Sometimes God has to use a hammer and a chisel on us. And it'll hurt. You're going to notice. You're not going to understand what's going on. But guess what? If you let it happen, you play along a little bit, you quit arguing, eventually you'll come out looking like something. And that's the goal. That's what you can hang people's hope on. And say, I have something good for you.
So we'll navigate to this conceptualization and an application of grace when we get to the verses, because where we're hanging out right now in the outlier area is trying to challenge our sense of amazing. Because when we experience amazing, we have to tell people. We live it. Jerry this week and I exchanged. Jerry had told us, and let me just go for kind of basic understanding. Jerry had told us about a show that's now streaming on Prime Video that he found really delightful to watch. Delightful is probably the wrong word. Well done. And it's the Reacher series. And if you're familiar with Tom Cruise, he did 2 movies on the character. But there's a series right now with Prime Video, and man, it's wonderfully well done. And Jerry had to share that because Jerry and Sherry both like the character of Mr. Reacher. I think Sherry's read the books, and watching the characterization of a true to life character who exemplifies what the books Jack Reacher looks like was probably marvelous. And then watching him go through this process closer to the book was exciting. And so Jerry shared that with us. Elle and I watched the series and we enjoyed it. We shared back with Jerry. Good reference there. Thanks for letting me know that. And so Jerry didn't just rest with that. He then said, well, Garrison, my son, and I went to go see the new movie starring Spider-Man guy.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
It's Uncharted.
Exactly. And I said back to Jerry, I said, well, the critics say that maybe he's over his head in the movie. And Jerry said back to me, he said, yeah, I know he's used to the guy. I'm used to the guy playing Spider-Man, but this works. And then some of the surrounding stars work. And this is in the vein of national treasure. Mm-hmm. And so Jerry took something that he found exciting and shared that, and then shared more in-depth information with me to the point where, okay, I suggested to Ellen, hey, honey, want to go out to the movies and go see this? Because when you have experiences of stuff that you find if not just mildly enthralling or mildly entertaining, if you find it amazing, you tell people. Sherry, if you hang out with Sherry on Monday night, you will watch Sherry enjoying fun and then also doing a thing where she'll call me up in the middle of the week and she'll say, hey, do you have suggestions for me to contribute to the fun that I have on Monday night? And I will do that. Now, this is completely legal, what it is that I do. So she'll ask me for some song suggestions to put in her growing and huge repertoire of songs that she likes to sing on Monday night. And I'll send those out to her and she'll say, neat, I've done this, I'll try this, because it's a neat exchange and it's something she finds amazing and fun. And she indulges in it. And if you hang out with Sherry for any period of time, you will probably find out that she has a love for singing. In fact, I remember when I first met her several years ago, she told me something that's quite different than her life right now. She said this, I used to sing. I used to like to sing. And then she said, I don't know what happened. But that's not who she is right now. Because she's rediscovered that, re-engaged this thing that was a fun, celebratory part of her life. And now, if you come out on a Monday night, you will see Sherry practicing fun, if not something that she finds celebratory and maybe a little amazing. When we experience amazing, we have to tell and share people. And folks, churchgoers, Jesus professors, Jesus possessors don't do this very well. We find Jesus kind of boring. Jesus is kind of boring.
I want to share. I've been trying to do it more. We don't have to walk alone anymore.
Right.
You know, a lot of people are feeling really empty. They don't go through something, you know. Ellen might call me and say, wow, I'm really sorry to hear, but she doesn't know what I'm going through. Guess what? I've got someone who walks with me every day who knows exactly what I'm going through and gives me strength and courage and, you know, hope, I guess.
Yeah.
We don't really attack that aspect. You know, I think about the yoke you were talking about. We've been walking around in this yoke that really has two spots. We've, you know, been walking around in circles a lot of the time, getting, you know, smaller and smaller when, you know, gosh, Jesus is ready. Holy Spirit's ready to yoke up with us.
We don't find that amazing. When Trent does the reminder that he does, and maybe, I don't know, I would hope it's not an old people thing, but, you know, when Trent describes Michelangelo chipping away at what doesn't belong, if you get older and more mature and you try to grasp the amazing, look, you don't have to try to be good people, which is what Christians do, folks. Church people try to be good people. And this is why I said we won't talk about this concept of grace until we kind of get there. The point of what should amaze you about grace as you get it is you don't have to try anymore. And I know that sounds like an odd statement. If I need to clarify you, yeah, you don't have to try to be good people anymore. Because what you do matters, but it doesn't count as much as what Jesus did. And that's a really hard substitution exchange for us to really get our heads around, because Jesus doesn't show up. He doesn't remind us that we owe him something. He doesn't come down and then hold us accountable. He doesn't do any smiting when we miss the mark. So we just kind of feel that maybe there's stuff we really should be doing. And sometimes Christians don't have a sense of peace. We're about as anxious as the rest of the world. And if you need to take my temperature on that, I can name you a whole bunch of Christians that were freaking out during COVID. Some of them are still freaking out right now. Because this life is all there is. And if I don't have the cosmetics, if I don't have the health, if I don't have the beauty, if I don't have the stuff that this life says I should have, then my life is not amazing and I might as well just end it. Or quit doing what I'm doing with this Jesus stuff because it's not paying off. I'm winding this down, so I'm going to ask for your thoughts and your comments. And I'm going to remind you that unless there's an interruption this week, we will truly start next week about asking how you receive Yahweh's grace. what looks like. So those two questions are where we're going to start. But thoughts from you about today. Enjoyability versus fun. Mundane or triviality in terms of grace or trivial grace versus amazing grace. And our attitudes toward how amazing should be expressed. Your thoughts about that as we close up for today.
Well, I'm thinking about the t-shirt I'm gonna make.
Okay.
Steve started it off with, I get to worship, learn life and truth, share hope, serve. I've got like a checklist down the back.
Okay.
And I'm still working on it.
I think a big t-shirt with a great logo, I'll wear that all day. Me and a student friend have one we're working on that says, dude, your guy is dead. And sickies like Steve and Bruce and Jerry will get that, because basically we're telling you any religion you got other than Jesus.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if it gets you talking about why I'm saying that on my shirt, I'm all for it, because crazy that way. So I think good t-shirt, good bumper sticker, logo, that stuff that we can put logos on. If it creates conversation so we can tell you about the creator of the universe and what he did for us, let's do it. Yes. It's a reminder for us to understand what Trent keeps reminding us, that we could live in the trenches. But the common grace of the Lord says we don't have to. We get blessed. We get to live where we live and do and experience what we get to experience. And on top of that, those of us here say we know the creator of the universe and what he's done for us, and that he lives still. That's huzzah all day long. It's other stuff. Thank you for that, Diane.
I'll say I don't like the idea of calling it mundane. I think it's hardly mundane. I like the very old-fashioned definition of common as shared, rather than the slightly less old-fashioned version as tacky and low class.
Okay.
Which is what our culture wants to use. But common meaning shared, meaning it's something that we all get to enjoy, which we kind of hit on. But more importantly, if we're all the commoners here in the very old-fashioned sense of the word, who's the Lord?
Yes.
And isn't this a Lord that we would be proud to serve, rather than a Lord that is, treats us like dirt and treats us like property and treats us like, expendable, interchangeable functionaries? So I'd say there's hardly anything tacky or mundane about any of this. I think it's the amazing thing is that we are even given the privilege of sharing any of it at all.
Love it. Love it. And when Trent says what he just says, it brings to mind kind of the origins of that phrase, common sense, that we use a lot. Because common sense is not what it is that Trent sort of alluded to, that people think, which is a shared sense. It's not. It had to do with your status. So it was the commoners understanding how the culture was to work itself out when we talk about common sense. So it doesn't mean that we all share that sense. Originally, it comes from, this is what the commoners knew and understood in terms of how to operate. Folks, there's a lot to be excited about. That Jesus says we don't have to try. That Jesus says we're not under the burden of 613 laws that we find we have to write around because we can't complete them. The older I get, not having to try to be wholly myself kind of makes me excited. Now, it doesn't mean that I can do stuff that the Lord doesn't honor without consequence, number one, but also because his death means so much. No, but what it means is I don't have to keep a score sheet on how many times I blew it every day. And that's remarkable. That's that yoke. That's that burden that's light. And that's that Sabbath rest. And you'll have Christians argue with you about this, that Jesus is not the Sabbath. The Sabbath is the Saturday. I will go to my grave arguing that Jesus is the ultimate rest. He explains that several times. And our rest in him means you don't have to be anxious for nothing. No, that was the negative. You don't have to be anxious for anything. And that in your own skill, in your own ability, you can't please God. Jesus has already done the work. It's like you paying a guy to do your homework in school, you getting an A, and you never getting, okay. And it looks like your work because you turn it in and it's in your handwriting, but it's not yours and you know it, but you get credit for it. Do not use that with your children. Do not practice that when you're taking courses. It was a bad illusion, but at least it was the first one that came to my mind.